There are some books that you just have to read before you die. Stories that have shaped culture, inspired innovation, and in some cases, actually had the power to change the world. Hopefully I'm not going anytime soon, but in this video, I want to talk about 10 books that I personally feel like I have to read before it's my time to go. Some of these are classics that you'll probably have heard of. There's a few hidden gems in there which were new to me. And then I've also got a couple of more modern books which are shaping some of the world that we're seeing today. With my 10 picks, these aren't all just famous books. What I've also tried really hard to do is pick out books which mean something to me. So some of these have been recommended by friends and family, and others might have a story to tell to go along with why I've picked them. So my first book that I want to choose is a story that's been inspiring me for as long as I can remember. So starting with Walt Disney, the Biography by Neil Gabler. And this feels like a great place to start for me, because Walt Disney was one of the great all-time creatives, and he's someone that's inspired me throughout my life. I was definitely someone that had Disney throughout the house growing up, and I'd always have to go to the cinema to watch the latest films that were coming out. So it feels like a great pick for someone that's inspired me creatively in my life. What I also love about this as my first pick is it reflects my changing reading habits over the last decade. Going back before that point, I probably wouldn't have been tempted to read a biography. I typically found that they were too long and that would put me off, but also I think I just tried to read a couple when I was too young and I hadn't fully engaged with them in the way I would hope to now. But that did all change for me when I read Walter Isaacson's range of biographies. The standouts have been Steve Jobs and also Leonardo da Vinci. But coming back to this book on Disney, it just feels like the perfect biography to read more about the creation of the company and the creator behind that vision. My second pick is Cider with Rosie by Laurie Lee. Now, this book actually came to me as part of a subscription which someone gifted me a few years back for Christmas. The idea was that each month you got sent a secondhand classic, and this one really stood out because I hadn't actually heard of it before receiving it. So having read up a bit more on Cider with Rosie, I now know that it's a poetic retelling of growing up in the countryside. And as someone who lives in the south of England and surrounded by countryside, which is one of the aspects of my life I really love, this feels like a perfect fit for me as a person. It feels like one of those books which really slows life down and reminds you of what matters most to you. That's why I'm really looking forward to finally getting to read Cider with Rosie. My third pick is Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Now earlier this year, I read The Wager by David Gran, which I would highly recommend to anyone who's interested in nautical adventures. And what it did was it reignited my passion for that genre. So when it came to picking this list, I feel like I just had to include Treasure Island, which feels to me like one of the originals. It's all about piracy, gold, and treasure maps, which is something I absolutely loved the idea of when I was a kid. So it kind of takes me back to that childhood feeling. I'm already getting excited talking about the potential of reading it. And I also want to understand once and for all why this story has lasted generation and what makes it feel so timeless. My next pick is Hard Times by Charles Dickens. Everyone talks about Oliver Twist or Great Expectations, and sometimes I feel like Hard Times can be slightly overlooked. But in a way, that's what's drawn me to it for this list, because it's probably the Dickens classic novel that I know the least about. It still has Dickens' classic moral clarity and social realism, and this one dives deeply into industrial life and how it actually shapes people. That's why I've always wanted to give this book some love, and I feel like it's one that I have to read before I go. Then I've gone for Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Now, go easy on me here, because I've never actually read a period romance, and I feel like making this list, that felt like something had to change. I was trying to get a bit of a better representation across the different genres, so it felt like this one had to be in there. Because for me, Austen and her work, and particularly Pride and Prejudice, are probably making up the cornerstone of English literature. This one's said to be extremely witty and has of course made lots of films and adaptations in recent years. So that's why I feel like it's a great place to start as a period romance piece. So fingers crossed for me that I enjoy it and it's an opening to a new genre that I haven't actually read before. Next up is 1984 by George Orwell. Now, of all the books on this list, this is 100% the one which I've been recommended the most times in my life. I even actually remember a few years ago, after I'd just read Animal Farm for the first time, and I was having a really good discussion with a friend about what we both liked about the book. And afterwards they said to me that 1984 was one of their favourite books of all time, and had I read it. I hadn't, so I went and picked up this exact copy, but of course it went on a bookshelf and I never got round to reading it. But For me, that's the funny thing about this. 1984 feels like one of those books which has just been absorbed into our culture. It's another novel which I remember watching plays and films when I was younger, but for some reason I never got round to enjoying the book for myself. I feel like that's got to change now, and actually those experiences of the plays from when I was younger, they feel like a distant memory. So I actually feel like I'd be going into this book fresh and hopefully gaining as much enjoyment as I did for Animal Farm. My next choice comes as a pair. So I've gone for the Odyssey by Homer, and I'd latch on the Iliad as well, which is the precursor to the Odyssey. For me, both of these books feel like the foundation of Western storytelling. They're about war, action, heroism, and adventure. And when I was at school, I absolutely loved the classic stories. I loved hearing about the fall of Troy with the wooden horse and Odysseus' journey back home to his family. They all really resonated with me, and I absolutely loved getting out into the playground and reenacting this with imagination. And I think also, with Christopher Nolan's film of the Odyssey coming out in 2026, I really want to read these books before that retelling. So I'm looking forward to see how Nolan interprets these books, but also having my own view of how it should look from reading it for myself. My 8th pick is The Devils by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, my friend actually gave me this copy a few years ago, and it was on the back of me telling them around how much I'd enjoyed The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. And what I loved about that particular book was that it was a fictional story, but told around real events. In that case, it was the Second World War. And what Fyodor Dostoevsky does so well is he focuses his books on politics, moral conflicts, and what it is that pushes us right to the edge. I really feel like I owe it to my friend to finally take up the challenge of reading The Devils, and also to start exploring the work of Dostoevsky. My final 2 books on the list are modern business classics, and the first is The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. When I was at university doing a postgraduate degree in business, all of the professors recommended that this was the book that we had to read. But instead, rather than actually read the book, I bought it and I joined a seminar that was teaching us the principles from the book. The idea of that was to take our business ideas and adapt our vision continuously whilst we were carrying out small experiments. The seminar was really useful, and it's still a lot of the principles that I carry with me today. As someone who's following my own new path as a business, this feels like a must read. And now for my final pick, and I've gone for The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. Steve Jobs actually marked this book as essential reading, and it's all about how even successful companies can fail if they ignore innovation. I'm especially intrigued to read this against the growing force that is AI. It's interesting to me to see how large and small companies handle exploring their core product range against the opportunities that present themselves through innovation. And as someone who's obsessed with long-term growth and creative thinking, I feel like this is also the perfect book to end on. So those are my 10 books which I feel like I have to read before I die. I tried to find books that will inspire creativity, imagination, and importantly for me, curiosity. I also tried to connect my personal reasons for picking these books, because I really do feel like if we want to start ticking important books off our bucket list, that personal connection can play a big part in that. I'd love to know what books you'd have in your list, so please do let me know in the comments. I'm always looking out for new books to add to my collection. If you enjoyed this video and you're looking for more content about book-inspired themes, then please do give me a subscribe and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.